Thanks for coming, everybody. Apparently I haven't chased everyone away, which is relieving. So before we start, let me just ask you, what do people want from this workshop? This is actually a workshop, which means you are supposed to work, not me. And we can run that different ways, so it might be good if you have very strong convictions what should happen here, that you say that, so I don't do anything that will disappoint you. Anyone here with a very strong desire of anything?
Yes, I
Yes.
want to know what is consciousness.
You want to know what is consciousness? Okay, let's see whether we will be approaching that question at the end of that session. Come in, bring a chair and join the circle. Anybody else?
I'd be interested in the evolution of consciousness.
Okay.
Any ideas on that? How it came to form in our
I'm not sure we can cover that one, but we can try.
You want?
I'm curious about the relationship between quantum theory and systems theory.
Okay. Here is, come and bring chairs and join in the circle. Here is what I thought we could do. I thought we run that in maybe 3 separate parts. One is, I would actually like to start with something experiential for you, because we are all very much in our heads these days, and so to start off with something like that. And then I could show you, okay, welcome, a couple of impulses which I think are very important to know. Just a few websites from the internet to start discussion. And then we could go into a free-floating discussion and exchange where everybody can participate, and if anyone has questions which anybody else might be able to answer, or I might be able to answer, we could do that. Would that be a good format for everyone? Okay. Now, I call this workshop Bodies Without Souls and Consciousness Without Bodies, or something like that, because I really want to address this issue, or I want us to address this issue. So to start up, I suggest we get up and do something for our bodies. Are you okay with that? Anybody here who is afraid of touching anybody else? No? Okay. So get up. Huh? Get up and find yourself a partner. Just one partner. We do a little exercise. Maybe we need more space, but perhaps that's sufficient. Just find yourself a partner, and I need also a partner because I need to demonstrate that. You're happy to be my partner with that? Okay. And what we do is very simple. We pat each other's backs. But before you do that, the person who is going to be patted first, this is the lady in front of me, and anybody else, just get centered. Feel your legs and your feet on the floor, and feel your body as it is now, and stay with your experience of your body. And the person in the back, start patting the back of the person slowly, softly, from beginning up to the legs. And while you do that, stay connected with yourself, with your feelings, with your experiences. And now start. Just patting the back, and everybody finding a partner. You can also do it in a row if you like, and go down, and try various speeds, and try various softness, and go down, patting the back of the person, and stay with your experience. Stay with your experience all the way down. And up again. And as you do that, just experience what it is like to be with someone else who you may not have known, not have touched before. And then slowly let go, and everybody focus inward and just feel for a moment, how is it now? How does my body feel? How am I? And then we switch roles. When you're prepared, the other person is patting you, or you can also turn around and do it in a row as you do. That's fine. Okay, and start. Again, start at the top or at the back, and start patting the other person. And whoever is being patted, stay connected with your body and with your feelings. Experience how it is. Try various speeds and various softness and fastness, whatever you feel like. And see how it is for you, who is patting the other person, how it feels. Touching someone, patting someone. And go all the way down and back again. If you haven't been to the legs, then go down to the legs. Okay, and then slowly stop this and take your time to go back to yourself. And now feel and experience how you're feeling now. And then I would invite you to go back to your place and sit down. Thank you. This was a little starting exercise just to get us awake and maybe a little bit into our body, because I would like you to know, is everybody comfortable having chair place? Maybe you need to move out a bit so we have more space there. Okay. Because I would now like to start with a little reflective meditation maybe. Okay? And I would invite you to just sit comfortably with your legs on the ground, your feet on the ground, and however you feel comfortable to sit here and focus inwardly. Meaning either close your eyes or let them focus on a place in front of you on the floor, and just defocus ever so slightly so that you can really bring your attention inward to yourself and make contact with your breathing. When I say make contact with your breathing, it doesn't mean to change anything, but just to see to experience where you are. And if you gentlemen stop talking, I have an easier life. Just experience where your breath moves now, no matter where you feel it, whether it is in your chest or in your bottom or in your stomach, wherever you feel it, just rest with your awareness there. And now I want you to remember or recall an experience which you had recently or in the past where you just felt your body, where you were just your body. And this might have been a very pleasant experience like we have in sports or in sex or somewhere else, or it might be a painful experience. The experience where you were just your body. And recall it in a way that you can actually deal with it. So it's no use going into the experience and reliving it, but looking at it, as if you were looking at a picture or at a photograph. And recall the circumstances, recall whether there was anybody else there, what it was to have this physical experience of being just body for a moment or a while. And now, in that situation, ask yourself, how did my conscious experience relate to this? Was it a conscious experience or was it unconscious? How did my consciousness feel or experience this situation at this very moment? And maybe you know the answer right away, or maybe something is coming up. Whatever is coming up, just let it be. And then let that experience fade into the back and recall another experience where you may have had a prime experience of consciousness of itself. And we sometimes have that when we have specific spiritual experiences or other types of experiences. Just see whether you can find one of those experiences in your past, recent or long ago, doesn't matter. And again, recall it and let it become a little bit more vivid now, in the sense that you see, was anybody there? Were you alone? What were the circumstances of that experience? And maybe you can actually look at the pure essence of the experience, pure consciousness or consciousness as it was then. And then ask yourself, how did my body feel at the time? Did I feel my body? How did I experience it? Was it in any way involved? Was it important or not important? Did I feel anything? And now, place these two experiences in front of your inner eye next to each other, so that you can see the experience where you were fully embodied, body as it were, and the one where you were pure consciousness, and compare them. Is there any difference? And if so, what is the difference? Are they similar? In what way? Just look at them conjointly. And maybe there is some essence or something that comes out of this now for you. Just be open to it and let it emerge. And then slowly and in your own time, bring yourself back with your awareness into the room, or maybe deciding to open the eyes and wiggle your toes and your fingers and bring yourself back. And I would like people to share a bit, if you like. I know we are a big group, and this is not easy for some people, and not everybody has to. But whoever wants to share, what did you experience? What did you? Is there anything you want to share? What you felt? What you saw? Yep, please go on.
The first memory was actually being in a gym where I go twice a week with my trainer. And I was on an electrical machine which helps the circulation and makes the vibration. So I was very much in my body. I could feel the vibration of the machine. I could enjoy the sensation of the circulation moving. But at the same time I was observing. The other one.
Sorry, I didn't get the last bit at the same.
I was observing what was happening.
You were observing.
As well as experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was an experience I had when I was 11 of actually leaving my body, being completely disembodied, as it were, in space. I knew I had left the body and I was anxious about getting back to it, but I couldn't see the body and I wasn't aware of the body. I was aware that I was absolutely in space, in the darkness of space. So there, I wasn't aware of the body, if you see what I mean, but I was aware of consciousness. I was aware that I was aware.
That's an interesting structure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being aware of being aware.
Yeah, even at the age of 11. And that started my whole life pattern of discovery, really.
Did you see your body at the time?
No.
Oh, you didn't even see it?
No, I was way, I went through a very narrow channel with a roaring noise, which is typical of oceanic experience. But of course I didn't know that at that age. So I didn't see the body, I wasn't aware of the body, but I was aware of the needing to get back to the body and not being left in space. And I did get back through the same channel, like an umbilical cord.
Good you did, otherwise you couldn't do the gym.
Okay, that's what I...
Thank you. But that's interesting, isn't it? Because there is no such thing as an experience of the body without experience or without observing.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's why I'm so interested in what is consciousness.
Well, obviously something different from the body. Otherwise you wouldn't have been able to maybe observe that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, anybody else wants to share?
I'll go.
Yeah?
I just came in from Santorini last night, and for anybody who's been there, they have many stairs. And so I was walking just yesterday up, not a high hill, but hillish, and I thought I was going to die. I was huffing and puffing, and I was halfway up and had to stop, and I was very much in my body and not liking it at all. I felt old, I felt out of shape. I couldn't understand how I couldn't go so many meters without having to stop and take a break. So that was an unpleasant experience of being in my body. And I do need to go back to the gym when I get back to Canada. I learned that much. My other experience was actually several years ago. I was in a 7-day silent retreat, and I went and I did a 5-hour sit, which is a meditation, which was 20 minutes and then 60, and then it just went on for 5 hours, and I sat there. And I over time lost contact with my sense of body and moved deeper into emptiness, but it was a sweet emptiness. And typically when I sit, I feel my neck hurts and my back hurts, and it's not physically comfortable, but that time I could have stayed forever. And the only reason I stopped and came back to the world was because it was dinner time. I had to stop. Otherwise, I could have just kept going. So when you asked us to sit with the two different experiences, I actually saw the image from your presentation earlier, which was the circle on top of the square. These two completely different ways of being, and I'm not sure what the relationship is between them.
Interesting, isn't it? Because we have two completely different modes of being in a way. Well, I can relate to that experience of yours, because I also go on retreats, and I typically have pain in my knees like mad after a while, and they just vanish. They just vanish. And then I'm there I'm there with my pain, or I'm there without pain. And the quality of being present is in a way similar, but it's more pleasant without pain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah? But the quality of being doesn't change. That's the interesting thing.
Right.
So, anybody else wants to share?
Yeah, the first question I found it very tricky because I couldn't find any answer to it, any proper answer, except when in deep sleep, when I'm not dreaming, or when I was a baby, I don't remember anything from it. But when I do something, even if it's high speed, even if I'm tired, even if I'm excited, I keep I have a calculator going in my mind, and it's full of thoughts all the time. I may push it to the back of my mind, but it still works. It's there. So I would say I have no proper experience of being just a body and knowing it. My second would be, usually it's lucid dreaming. If I want to have such an experience, I go to sleep without being tired, and so I can choose my way in. It's very slow. I feel my aware consciousness as a hum. And when I focus on that hum and go in, it becomes slower and slower and develops into a sort of music, and then I go in. and suddenly I can build my world. I have no body then, but I have sort of godlike powers of building a world.
And you have no body then?
Only if I wanted to manifest.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can have all the powers I want without particular body. May or may not have human shape.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you. Anybody else wants to share?
Because, I find it interesting because I'm always, I can't separate the two that much, even though they're separated. And I'll give you an example. In the first one, we're talking about in body, the experience is totally the body. Well, the first, I bounced from two things. So the first one I bounced to was a particular afternoon where I was surfing and it was just me, my body, and the wave. I mean, that was it. There wasn't any thinking about it necessarily. It was just this flow, And then the second one was I was river rafting, and I was out of the boat and going down a waterfall underwater, which is kind of a frightening experience, But I'm used to water, so it doesn't bother me that much. But the thing is I was totally in my body. I remember the ice cold water, the tumbling around, but at the same time I was watching it from a different point, So it was kind of a weird mixed experience. And then when you asked me to go back to the experience of out of a body, consciousness, more or less. Again, it was kind of a mixed thing because I remember seeing my body laying on the floor and thinking, this is really a weird dream. I'm looking at my body. And then I realized that I wasn't in my body. I mean, I realized that the dream thing I was dreaming was actually my body. Mm-hmm. And then, for me, it was like a slight roar, but then it was also a huge electrical thing, that, like, getting your whatever it is back into your body is kind of a painful experience, because you got a lot of energy or something, So, I mean, so again, it was like, because it was, the weird part about it was there was the body, here was the consciousness, but I'm also conscious of these feelings of getting back in the body, which seemed like physical feelings almost, So it's hard for me to separate the two because they seem to conflate.
That's an interesting structure, isn't it? We have these two different ways of looking, and it's very difficult to separate it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? That's what you're saying.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Can you close the door, please, when you come in?
Can you close the door?
And join in the circle if you want to participate. Yeah?
Mine was interesting to me because I have difficulty with movement and balance, and I sometimes fall down, things like that. So my body is not as operative as I'd like it to be. So what I noticed was the difference in how I felt, which was that I felt very heavy and constrained in the body. And when I focused on being in consciousness, I didn't. I felt lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking, well, maybe I could get my body to feel lighter too. Then that would be good. But that's the difference that I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very qualitative difference.
So the qualitative difference was lightness versus feeling heavy.
Heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And stiff versus being fluid.
But still you had the experience of it.
Right,
Didn't you?
right. Yes.
So, and what would the experience be?
About
The fact of experiencing, I mean.
I was walking.
Hmm?
I was walking.
Yeah, you were walking. But when you say the body was heavy,
Right.
would you call that a dream or an experience, or what would it be?
It probably was a memory.
A memory, but at the time when you had it?
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, at the time when you had it, it might have been an experience, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Which means you had, at the same time, a very conscious experience of that.
Oh, when I have it.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I am very aware
Yeah,
of it.
that's what I mean.
Yes, I have to be aware of it so I don't fall down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. You want to come in somehow so people move out that we have more space here? Yeah, I think we'll manage. It's always a bit difficult to accommodate new people in a circle, but it's doable. Welcome. So anybody else wants to share? Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to share because I was astonished, I was surprised that in the two cases I had really a feeling of oneness.
Uh-huh.
So the first experience is, it was yesterday night, yesterday morning, I was alone in the swimming pool, in this big swimming pool, so I could stretch my body swimming, and I really felt the pleasure of the body being able to stretch in the water, and it was very, I really felt my body, and it was very pleasant experience. And in a certain way, I felt one with the water, but I was with my body really. And the other experience is completely different. I was very young. I had an accident by climbing mountains, and we were a small group, and we almost crushed to the rocks. We were on the ice, and there was a moment where there was high possibility we crash on the rocks below. And I was very, very, very peaceful. And just out of my body, just in a very, very peaceful experience, which ceased when we finally could go up again, because everybody was afraid except me, which was... But the two experiences for me, when you asked us to remember, it was, in the two cases, it was oneness, in fact.
Interesting. Oneness, but still two different ways of
yes.
experiencing.
Yeah.
By the way, the first reported near-death experience in the literature was by a mountain climber, I think in 18 something or 1910, was published in the German Alpine Club Journal, and he published that because he wanted to be, people to be aware that there is no problem with dying. I'm not sure that's true, but that's very similar. Thank you. So, anybody else?
So I had an experience with aqua jogging just now, and I enjoyed it. I like the water on my body, and I like this movement. I could be for hours there, and the feeling was very a lot of pleasure principle, and but at the same time my thoughts were going on a little bit here and a little bit there, and I felt this combination. And the second one was I had a very, very strong light experience this spring. I was ill, and it was tremendous. And in this case, I felt also my body very, very good. But in another way, it was, I was identified in a way with my observer, and I felt on the same time something like love. Love is quite not the right word, but it's really hard to describe it with words. And I was in a completely surrendered position. I only surrendered to this experience. And with the aqua jogging, I like the feeling being very active. So for me, the difference was the active and a surrendering principle in a way.
So the principle was different, but the experience was very similar, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. But the one was much more greater.
Now we have to accommodate another person.
It's okay.
Join in the circle. It's always difficult. People having people outside. Yeah, there is. We'll manage. This is the miraculous expansion of the circle that you're doing. Anybody else wants to share? Yeah.
I would like to ask you actually not to share. I had several times.
Oh, you don't have to.
Well, not related to those
Okay.
meditations regarding body and consciousness. When you're in a situation of extreme danger, it happened to me several times that I detached from my body, and I just was extremely cool, and that reminds me of your experience, and basically saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't in the body with all the emotions and hormones and adrenaline and fear and fight and flight. I was somewhere else. And actually I became a witness of me being in danger. And that helped me get out of the situation. I don't know if this makes sense.
Of course it does.
Yes.
Very
So
interesting.
was I consciousness then? I wasn't body, I wasn't fear. I was just very calm. And
But how would you yourself see that? I mean, obviously that was a conscious experience, wasn't it?
I guess it wasn't in the body. It
Yeah,
wasn't.
well, it was maybe
because in the
not-
body it would have been extreme fear and panic.
So, I mean, this is very interesting because phenomenologically we've heard that various times now. We can have states that are kind of observing what is happening with high levels of consciousness. Apparently, that's what you're saying, right? More or less
How to call it.
attached or detached from the body.
I was very detached and saved my life. And then several minutes later, I connected to my body after the danger passed. And I experienced extreme anxiety and fear and trauma. So, but at the moment of danger, I was detached. I was very calm. I knew what to do. Exactly.
So
So this is similar to.
That is extremely interesting because it looks as if consciousness itself, in the pure essence, as it were, is not the same as emotions and pain, right? We have that pain thing, you and I, but can be very, very clear, just an observing modality, as it were, right?
It's higher intelligence telling.
Or a higher intelligence, whatever
what
you
to
might
do.
call it. I find that an interesting structure. Yeah, anybody else wants to share other experiences, or you have other experiences that don't fit, that's also okay. Now you want to know what consciousness is, you said, right? Initially.
Yes.
So what do you think consciousness is, having heard this?
I think we have several bodies, and not only the physical, and when we say we detach from that body, we are maybe in another, in a more subtle body. And with that we can experience different things. That's my explanation for these states.
That's your explanation, okay. Yeah, why not?
But I would be interested how you relate this to the quantum physics.
Well, as I have tried to explain this morning, I think it's not physics, it's about the theoretical structure. And the theoretical structure would allow us to understand these various experiences, which I think is a clear phenomenology. We have physical experiences that are somehow different in quality, and we have conscious experiences, and they still, most of the time, belong together. And if they don't, there is this pull, as long as we are alive at least, and what happens afterwards we don't know. And that seems to be a phenomenology we have to find a model for, and that's what I try to do, find a model for this phenomenology.
But maybe we could say we have an experience of the physical. That's the difference to say that I have a physical experience. Maybe because experience implies consciousness.
Exactly.
And but physical prehension, like Whitehead puts it, is not related to consciousness as itself. It is a different mode of taking in, of relating to.
Well, maybe what he's referring to, for those who don't know philosophy, is Whitehead's philosophy, and Whitehead had a philosophical position where he said an actual entity that is the smallest possible thing, even smaller than atoms, always has also an experiencing pole and a physical pole. And out of those many, many instances of experience, our experience kind of comes together and evolves. And that's actually quite a clever position, but it's of course difficult to understand how would these many experiences come together to be unified. And I don't think Whitehead solved the issue. Actually, that's my position. But anyway, that's a philosophical discussion.
What about the entanglement?
Well,
idea?
that would be a solution, or that would be a theoretical option to understand it. Here are two. You wanted to say something new?
I'm just thinking about what Rupert Sheldrake talks about when he talks about. Well, basically, the simplest way he puts it is like in a waveform. We have no way of knowing the frequency or anything about the wave until it passes through time.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you look at it as what kind of quantum it is, or what kind, we know where it starts. That's sort of nailed, and then when we finally understand what it is. So what he was saying is that at one end, the material side of things is always looking backwards. So
in a sense, it is, yeah.
So
we are crystallized past.
Right. So the material is always a backwards view, and the forward view is always the possibilities that exist. And he says consciousness is those possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're both sort of tales of the same thing. So that's why they're always together. And so in his view, everything has consciousness. It's just that the speed of the consciousness may be very dense in a rock and very high in a human. Because the human realizes these possibilities much faster than a rock would. And the rock may take its possibilities, because it does have possibilities, and it may take a few million years to become sand or whatever. So that's just if you try to mix it into a more physical metaphor, I think what Sheldrake is talking about is really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say that experience must be related to some sort of memory, and also observing as a concept.
Good point. Yeah.
You need to memorize something, otherwise there's no experience. There's no comparing of what happens to what happened, and there's no awareness.
Ektis nimi. You are Greek, are you? No.
I'm of Greek origin, but I don't speak Greek.
Ektis nimi empiria, Aristotle said. Experience comes from memory.
Right.
What was interesting to me is that the role of consciousness and maybe in pain. So sometimes if a person is in pain, they feel the pain a lot. And then sometimes I get engaged in other things and I no longer feel the pain. And so is that the fact that I'm using a different consciousness or is it that I'm a question of focus?
It's a question of focus, of course. When you focus differently, you are not related to to that painful process. And we have a neural understanding to understand how that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just follow up with that question then? So in the same 5-hour wonderful sit, of course I think, well, if I can do 5 hours, I can do 5 minutes. And so I returned to the Zendo after dinner, and I had a horrible time. So this idea, I mean, there's something about it works in one moment, and then you do exactly the same thing.
And
You
it
repeat
doesn't.
the experiment, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's an interesting phenomenon. I know it as well. It's an interesting phenomenon. Maybe we have a subtle shift in our expectation or in our consciousness which we don't realize, right? And if you have a subtle shift in your intention, then things change. And maybe, you know, there is a shift like, I don't know, this is pure guesswork now. Let's try it another time. I can do it. And suddenly you have another involvement. By just doing it, it's different.
And that implicates consciousness on another layer, right?
Yeah.
Because what
Or
I
maybe
bring to the
consciousness on the layer of intention.
moment. Right.
And
And
not
the full
of just
stomach.
being there.
And the full stomach. Huh?
And the full stomach,
And maybe a full stomach, yeah, quite so.
After dinner.
which is the body, right? That's
Yeah.
taken care of.
Well, related to what she said, it seemed to me so far that consciousness has a limited range of experience. She says something about the pain. From my experience, pain was coming up when everything else, when it was more important than everything else that was happening. When I find pain in some parts of my body, but usually I'm not aware of it. It's subliminal. And so I avoid injuries and getting sick, but just by scanning my body. Otherwise, when it comes up, it's too late.
Sure. But why do you say there is only a range of experiences? We don't know that, do we?
No, I said it's usually limited to a range of experiences. It cannot focus on everything at once.
Oh, it cannot focus on everything
It
at
has a
once, that's what
focus.
you mean?
Yes, yes.
Well,
You know, what you focus on and the amount of stuff you can bring to your awareness, that's one thing, but consciousness is another thing in my world.
that's interesting.
So in my world, consciousness is infinite. And we possess that infinite consciousness, but our ability to, if you had to experience all that all the time, you couldn't do it. You'd be flooded, you know. So you have to narrow it down. And in psychedelic research, they have this thing called the default network. And the default network is the network that actually suppresses all that stuff. And what happens is if you take some sort of psychotropic stuff, that default network slows down, and then you start getting flooded with all the stuff that's happening. So consciousness
But aren't you overwhelmed?
What?
Isn't there a feeling of overwhelmed?
Yeah. So,
That's the point.
so that, you know, it is, but that we're talking about consciousness, not awareness. You know, there's two different things in my book. So, you know, we have to have a narrow band of awareness in order to function, but we have the capability and the potentiality of extreme levels of consciousness if you want to. You know, that's why people sit there and meditate. You know, they want to explore that. You know, that's why people, you know, do stuff. You know. I mean,
Plus we can, of course, modulate this. That is something which is also interesting because we can focus very narrow, we can focus very broad, and then suddenly we experience other things. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was morning when you asked that question, working with people when they're in that situation. How can we help them to be in that awareness and see what's happening when a person is going through a trauma or someone is pulling you around? You know, that time you'll be more overwhelmed than in that awareness and registering what is happening with me.
how do we manage this? How do we help people when they are in that situation? Or how do we prepare people to be in that awareness, that whether it's a negative experience or a positive experience? How do we...
Well, that's a difficult one. I'm not a trauma therapist. And this is not a trauma workshop, so I don't have an answer.
No, but we say that...
But maybe someone has. Sorry?
When we say that being present and being aware, awareness,
Yeah?
bringing to the situation or aware in the present, how do we help? That's
How do we help bringing awareness to the present moment?
present moment, whether it's negative or positive.
Well, the standard procedure is just to come back to a recurrent process like breathing and your body and focus again and again. And stop the tendency to divert the awareness. That would be the standard procedure in my eyes. But you wanted to say
Yes,
something
in
there?
terms of memory, it really made me think. I remember reading about a guy who only has such short-term memory. He's only aware of the very moment. So would you say he's less conscious than other people that have memory? There's people who always tend to live in the past, and are they more conscious than someone who only knows of the very moment and always is in the very moment?
I'm not sure I understood your question because you're speaking very softly. I don't hear you well.
Okay, the difference between people who... There's people, for example, who always live in the past, thinking of their memories, are always living the past. And then I read about a guy who only has memory of the very present.
Of the very present. And
So
has no
he's
memories.
always conscious of the present, always in the moment. So I don't know that, memory is necessary for consciousness. Would you say that those
No, it's not, because otherwise people with dementia would not be conscious, but they are. Okay? But when you look at people with dementia, the memories of the past are necessary for functioning. Demented people are conscious, but they don't function. And that is what we just discussed. Aristotle's definition of experience is it comes from memory. And we bring experiences together to form representations of the world, to be able to function in the world. But it's not necessary for consciousness as such, apparently. That's also the interesting thing, how much brain damage we can sustain and still be conscious. So... Now, here is an interesting point for you. If I'm now relating, we have some more time, I'm now relating back to the model which I presented this morning, okay? And if you take that model seriously, then actually there is no reason why not parts of your consciousness might be actually not yours, right? Now this is a very tricky one because we are walking at the borderline to psychotic experience here. Okay, I'm not saying we are all psychotics. I'm just saying what psychotics experience is probably blown up or a more magnified way of our way of experiencing all the time. Because if you look at the model which I presented, which stipulates that whenever you have a group variable that defines a group and connectedness, and a variable that defines individuals that are separated, then there is no local correlation between the two. We have that in therapeutic experiences. Okay, everyone who is a therapist has this experience. I pick up material from my client. Is here a therapist who has not had the experience? Speak up. I don't think any serious therapist who is not just doing cookbook therapy has the experience, okay? Now, if that's true, that if we are in a relationship with someone that is ritually closed, that's what I would call ritually closed relationship, then there is always a shared field of consciousness, always. And we cannot avoid it, that's the point. even if we were to avoid it, it would probably be even stronger. So if we have that shared field of consciousness, whenever there are two people together, joined together, then there is no reason to assume that this does not happen all the time, like maybe now. Or like maybe when you ride on a bus and pick up some idea or some emotion. Have you had this experience? Yeah, come along.
Do you think it's a proximity effect?
I don't know. This is what I would like to find out.
That's the suggestion, isn't it, in this discussion, that when you're
There
talking
might
about
be
being...
proximity, but my experience is, I mean, if you are therapeutically active, you know that transference experiences can happen no matter how far distant people are. Sometimes it already happens before you meet someone, right?
So maybe it's attunement. Perhaps it's attunement as opposed
Maybe
to
it's
proximity.
attunement. I don't know what it is. I mean, this is all just ideas I'm throwing into the circus here.
Could I say something? What about the electromagnetic field?
Say that again?
What about the electromagnetic field that extends about 12 feet each side of all of us?
Actually, I don't think that these field, that's my opinion, I don't think that these field metaphors and these energy metaphors are helpful. Because if you take it physically, the strength of a field decays by the squared power of the distance. That's standard physics. So if you go away, the field power goes down like this, in an inverted relationship. So that, and therefore you should not be able to have distance relationship feelings with your client if you are a therapist, but you do. Therefore you should not have precognitive experiences, but you do. So I don't think a field metaphor can actually explain this. We use field metaphors because they are closer to our normal causal thinking, but I don't think they are actually factually true.
The same goes for distant healing.
Say that again?
The same goes for distant
Exactly.
healing.
There
It's not
have been some
necessary.
experiments across the globe, and that shouldn't happen if you go by a field metaphor. So think about mental content. Here is a little exercise which you can take away with you, because I think it takes quite a while to get used to that way of thinking, and I've been doing that now since 1995 or so, and I still discover very strange things about it, because it's really a new way of looking at things. If you in any type of relationship or in any type of situation, if you encounter in your field of consciousness strange content, ask yourself the basic question: where does it come from? And then see what happens. Have you tried that exercise? You're nodding.
Yes, I nod when we were in intervision of supervision. Then we were talking about applying something, and then sometimes doesn't matter from whom it is, but sometimes is it from me or is it from the client of what's happening? So it has not. People say, oh, it's now my transference. No, perhaps not, because perhaps it's the energy of what I don't know what.
Yeah.
From the client, of the ancestor, of something like this. I don't know, just leave it and just look to it, what is happening. I think it's very important to just be with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes ask, is it from me what I'm now anxious of, angry of? Is it something what I get anyway?
Yeah.
I think it's very...
And undoubtedly, it could be influenced by the person who's in that close proximity to you, but it gets even more complicated when you ask yourself the question, are the contents of my thoughts to do with the fact that I'm in Crete right now, or
maybe
in some other physical place? Do you know what I mean? Is the geography of the location, or do you know what I mean?
Or the history of the location or whatnot. Yeah. I mean, if you take it seriously, then the actual riddle is individuality and not connectedness. Right? If you take that type of thinking seriously, then it's actually difficult to understand individuality, but that's on another plane, right?
You said you cannot avoid picking up things from other people, and if you want to avoid it, it becomes even stronger. Have you any evidence on that? Or did I
No, I don't have any evidence, but the evidence I have is coincidental and comes from psychotherapy, because what is the normal fact is the more strongly someone denies emotions or experiences, the stronger their counter-transference relationship is. Yeah, would you agree? And that makes me think that if you try to really avoid it, then you flip into the counter situation, and then you are kind of victim of it. I'm not sure. Maybe you can kind of close your boundaries more or less. I think that's possible in a sense, but completely avoiding it, I don't think it's possible. Maybe we even shouldn't. Because if we were avoiding it completely, we were completely autistic.
Yeah, I mean, protecting yourself is one thing, and strictly avoiding it and putting a lot of energy in not picking up something is something different.
Exactly.
Are you familiar with the concept of memes, M-E-M-E?
Yeah, a bit. You asked me
How do you explain?
I don't know. I'm not very familiar, let's put it that way. So, yeah.
A meme is like a gene. It's the smallest unit of an idea. Whereas a gene is like
a meme is a theoretical construct.
Yeah.
That's the first point. About cultural
but
ideas.
I think of it as like
about cultural
what a gene
ideas,
is.
yeah, that are transmitted through language, through culture, through all sorts of things.
But there is also a theory that it's a living entity that is related to some elements in the air. I'm not sure how scientific this is, but that it goes historically and geographically.
Well, I think the idea of a meme has been created because there are these experiences, and it's very difficult to explain them reductively by material occurrences. But I'm not fond of the idea, because it is creating a new entity, as you say. And here I'm always a fan of a good old brother William from Ockham, who said, don't do that. Don't create entities if you are not really in desperate need. And I think it's a very good rule to live by. I think what we need is a model to understand these experiences, like if you have transgenerational processes going on, you could invoke the idea of a meme, of course, but I'm not sure it's helpful. You can also invoke the idea of a non-local correlation, and I think that is more helpful in the sense that we don't have to create a new theory for it. That's the reason why we use that model.
Epigenetics.
Yeah, that's another one, but...
No, but it's correlated to this. What's biological and what's... what you show, there's both, I think.
Is non-locality the same as non-temporality or relation over time?
Non-temporality is a specific form of non-locality, because non-local relationships can go beyond space and beyond time. You can have non-local correlations across time as well as across space. The point of these non-local correlations is they are always without any causal mediation. Therefore,
I didn't know that they are also over time.
Yeah, therefore they are also over time, because time is, scientifically speaking, spanned up by the process of light. Special relativity defines time, as it were, because that's Einstein theory. And let's be clear about that. These are all theories. They are not facts. They are theories. They are good theories. And Einstein said, that's one of my favorite quotes, there is nothing as practical as a good theory, which is true. But it's still a theory. And Einstein theory is the final speed in the universe is the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers approximately per second. Okay? And this is why time and space are related, and this is also why time comes into existence as a kind of physical reality through the transmission of causes through light. If you don't have that, you don't have time. There are other theories, physical theories, that make different assumptions. But for instance, in quantum theory, time doesn't enter until it enters as a parameter. But the fundamental equations of quantum physics are time-free. The point is, you can have these relationships also across time. That is why you can have transgenerational problems. Very simple, because there is no such thing as time in that model, which makes it possible to heal the past. By the way.
Yeah, that's a positive.
So it means we could have trans-generation relationship with our ancestors, but us.
Exactly. We as well.
Yes, activating them.
Yes, I think so. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I don't have any proof for that, but this is just logic. If you have a relationship that comes from the past into the present, then you might also have a relationship that goes the other way. Yeah?
I wanted to ask, physically related relationship, like they said about DNA?
Say that again?
Physically related relationship, I mean grounded in physical reality?
I don't think I understand what you're saying.
Let's go forward and...
I think we're talking non-local, right? You're talking about these relationships as non-local relationships, not causal relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, so forward, backwards, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And for that matter, I mean, since you bring up DNA, we could also envisage a coordination system within the body that actually functions very similar to genetics, but is not causal in the sense as we suppose DNA to be a causal relationship. All right? Now, I wanted to show you a few issues why I think this is so pressing. Have you ever heard of, I think Lindy McMullen mentioned transhumanism, right? Did she? A little bit. Have you heard any of that?
Yes.
Are you familiar with? No.
Okay.
You know. You are. Has anybody heard of the Project 2045? Some have.
No.
Can I show you? I just show you a couple of websites so you know what I'm talking about. Okay? Is that okay? Let's get that thing going. Hopefully I can.
If you can't, I can.
You just have to tell it's not very, I'm not giving you a full presentation, I'm just trying to show you a few things to move the discussion into a more practical or even more future-oriented thing. All right, here is a website that comes from what you can see, www.2045.com. That is a project, and those of you who know it better than me, please come in and correct me. That is a project that has been set up by engineers, IT guys, and people who want to make a human robot with personalized consciousness by the year 2045. It's quite ambitious, actually. You can see 35,809 members have enrolled, and here is some information. So, towards a new strategy for human evolution in New York City, the strategy, as Itskov, that's the Russian guy who actually sponsors that with a few billion, I believe, pointed out, involve an ambitious big picture project called Avatar to enable the transfer of individual personality into sophisticated artificial carriers. And here is, I go to the Wikipedia site, there it is a little bit clearer. That's the Avatar project. So Avatar A is a robotic copy of a human body remotely capable of interpreting commands, directly from the mind and sending information back to the mind in a form that can be interpreted via brain-computer interface. So this is estimated is finished by 2020. So that would be a human body that is a robot controlled by a human mind. Now, Avatar B, to be finished 5 years later. These guys are really ambitious, aren't they? An avatar in which a human brain is transplanted at the end of one's life. So if you die, you can donate your brain, and this Avatar B will then accept the brain and is supposed to actually work as a personalized robot, providing life support for the brain and allowing it interaction with the environment, possibly mounted into an existing Avatar A chassis. Then Avatar C is an avatar with an artificial brain in which a human personality is transferred to and emulated at the end of one's life. The first successful attempt is supposed to happen around 2035. And then we have a hologram-like avatar. This is the ultimate goal of this project, but it's optional since biological diseases are prevented, blah, 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 blah. So they want to actually, by the year 2045, these guys here, by the year 2045, they want to have constructed a personalized robot. And then you have all sorts of things going on here, where people say, well, this is all possible. They even pose with the Dalai Lama supporting that project, which I'm not sure whether it's true or it's a fake. And hang on, there is another one. Maybe that's over there. Okay, here's the manifesto. Mankind has turned into consumer society standing at the edge of a total loss of the conceptual guidelines necessary for further evolution. The majority of people are almost exclusively absorbed in merely maintaining their own comfortable lives. Now they go on and say, we will need different types of evolutions, and in the end, the avatar will be the response to that. Okay? So this is one of the projects that come out of that movement. Other ones are Kevin Warwick from the University of Reading. He is the guy who, in this image, for instance, and I encourage you, Google Ken Warwick and look at his YouTube videos. That's very interesting. Here he had an electrode implanted into his arm that takes up the signals from his median nerves, transfers it to that robotic arm, and whenever he clicks, the robotic arm also clicks. Whenever he moves his hand, the robotic hand moves. And someone even said, I'm not sure that's true, I haven't checked that up, that someone actually had his arm amputated and replaced by a robotic arm because that helps him play tennis better. Not sure that's true, but if it's not true, it's certainly not far from reality. So this guy has a lot of ideas about robotics, and I think that's sufficient for now to get the discussion started. But the point I'm making here is we are actually on the brink of a very technologized understanding of personality and of what it means to have consciousness, what it means to actually be a human being. It's all being on the verge of being transformed. And here we are chatting about higher states of consciousness. What do you make of that?
I think planetary consciousness is much more important than this. I'm sorry.
Sorry? Say that again?
I think that our planetary consciousness is more important than technological advances.
Well, maybe, but these guys are collecting billions of funds.
And we're not.
Huh?
And we are
And
not.
we are not, exactly. Kevin Warwick got about, I think, 3.5 billion from the European community to research his stuff. And he is one of the most high-profile researchers in that area.
Wonderful stuff. This is restoring function to...
Sorry?
This is capacity to restore function to great disabilities.
To?
People with disabilities.
That's true. I mean,
that's really where it's coming out of movement.
I'm not denigrating the fact of robotics. I mean, these people, they do great stuff with amputated people, people who have lost legs on the wars, I don't know what, you know, surely. But the point is, the way this is progressing is making human consciousness in a way, superfluous, because these people think, well, if we build a complex enough machine, then consciousness will come out of that machine anyway, and these machines will have consciousness, just like we have.
I think that's not true. What they want is eternal life. They want to transplant the human consciousness into a machine to live eternally, but they don't want to ersetzen, to replace.
Well, the Avatar 2045, these people, they don't do that. But there are other people in the IT community, in the artificial community, and they write somewhere on the website, this is the mainstream opinion of 99% of people working at MIT and of high caliber scientists, and they're probably right.
So as I understood, if in 2045 it will be possible to put the brain into the machine. It means that the human's brain will be there, and consciousness will be there, and nerves will be there.
That's what they think.
So then it
Whether
means
it's true, we will see.
Then it means that this machine will still feel everything, and will be able maybe be more conscious in this world, as it's will have some benefits. Maybe we were monkeys before, then we look like human beings, and now maybe some kind of progression into something more advanced.
Well, we don't know. That's what they think.
The recurring theme there is personality, which has nothing to do with consciousness. We all have consciousness, but have very different personalities. And I also had a different personality at age 6. I will have a different personality at age 60.
Hopefully.
I would like to testimony quickly of my work, because I am working with people who sometimes have a brain completely damaged, and it's a bit complicated to explain everything. I work with accompanied inner communication, and I feel I am like a decoder for the consciousness of these people. Mm-hmm. And what I experience every day is that also when the brain is destroyed, the consciousness is there. Mm-hmm. So in my studies, in my own research...
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, well, I try to explain quickly. What I am doing is coming from what in Germany it's gestützte Kommunikation. I don't know if you know that. Gestützte Kommunikation, facilitated communication. Uh-huh. But I work on a deeper level. So facilitated communication is supposed to be really the concrete level, what you like to drink, what do you... I work on a deeper... Can you just as that I show? So I work hand to hand. I support the hand of the people. I work with a computer. So I have the keyboard of the computer. And I follow an impulse. So I accompany the impulse of the person. But it's not coming from the muscular tonus. I feel like a life movement, you know? And it allows expression of the inner voice of the person. And in my books, I referred, so I don't know how to understand toward that, I referred to John Eccles, who is a neurologist and whose hypothesis is that the brain might be a decoder, so he's Nobel Prize in medicine, and he's dead now, and his hypothesis is that the brain might act like a decoder of the consciousness. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a very interesting book, which is how the consciousness controls the brain. And in his book he explains, so it's his theory, that we would have noticed very small particles in the brain which might act like a decoder, a bit like a radio. So I just wanted to because it, of course, it's a lot of questions coming together.
No, that's extremely fascinating. It wouldn't be difficult to understand what you're doing using our model, because you're actually picking up other person's conscious impulses and giving expression to it, right?
Yes.
But if you relate it back to what a mainstream scientific viewpoint of consciousness is, this shouldn't be possible, right?
Exactly.
Because you don't have direct access to that body.
Yes, exactly.
Very simple.
I'm wondering if we can just address the issue of empathy, because there's empathy, so I take your point, Paul, though, additional limbs that work, it's all good if you have stuff that's cut off. And it's even great it's better to be conscious than unconscious, but it's not enough to be conscious. It's necessary, it's not sufficient. Empathetic consciousness is better than sociopathic consciousness. Otherwise, we're all going to have a problem. And what I don't hear in this very interesting conversation is, how will the empathy component be introduced into these models? Or are we talking about, battalions of sociopaths that are conscious and strong? Like, that piece needs to be addressed somehow if this is a line that we're exploring.
Yeah, I mean, empathy is actually very simple using the model I have presented this morning, because there you have a very strong component of sharing conscious content, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So I think empathy is actually a function of you being able to consciously relate to other people, maybe even unconsciously. Often functions unconsciously. Mm-hmm. If you use a model of consciousness that comes out of that mainstream body of work just being a result of, then you have only one way of creating empathy via the mirroring of other people's actions. That is where the fabulous mirror neurons come in. But I don't think that's enough to actually explain empathy.
And it might be worth saying that empathy does not predict altruistic behavior. And the relationship between psychopathy and empathy is complicated.
Yeah, that's
true.
true.
A psychopath can be very empathic.
Oh, normally they're very empathic. That's why they are so efficient.
It's a misnomer that psychopaths don't have empathy. Sometimes they're very empathic. They know exactly what they're doing to the victim, and that's why they keep doing it. But the intention is an evil intention. But that still is relevant to what your concern is. How are you going to,
program that in?
How are you going to take the possibility of evil outside of the robot?
Well, you can't, okay? Because evil and good intention is a category of morals. Right. And morals do not occur in the natural world. You cannot use science to construct morals. Moral is actually something that comes, in my terminology, from inner experience of connectedness. And that is another reason why I think we need a different model of consciousness. Now, we are nearly at the end of our, I think, 1.5 hours, 3:30 we are finished, right? So let's finish up by, you wanted to say something?
This, at 4 o'clock.
At 4 o'clock?
Yeah, at 4 o'clock, yes.
Is that true? Oh,
yes,
we have more time.
Yes. I haven't timed you, so...
So it's 2 hours we have?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was... Okay, then we have no...
Can't leave it.
Okay.
I think that this project excludes the possibility that the consciousness isn't all entirely in the brain. For example, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember where I came across this information, but in studies of near-death experience, where the brain is completely shut down, you're still having the experience. You're in another place. So from that we can extrapolate that the brain isn't responsible for all of our tuning into consciousness.
That's a very important point you're making here, because the assumption of all this work is it's only the complexity of the brain that produces consciousness.
Yeah, it's purely a materialistic approach.
It is, yeah, and the question is whether that is true. And as you say, near-death experiences, they sometimes actually preclude that possibility. There are a couple of very well-documented cases. The last one I've heard is that of Ibn Alexander. Heard of that? Yes?
And also Pim van Lommel.
Pim van Lommel has documented a couple of cases. The reason why Ibn, E-V-E-N, Alexander is the second name. The book is called Proof of Heaven, which is a completely silly title, but it is a very good description, because that guy was in septic coma for a week in the intensive care unit, and they have documented very well what happened to him. And you want to say something there?
Yeah, I want to comment on the Ibn Alexander situation, because I was involved with that to some degree.
And there's a great article in, I believe it's Rolling Stone magazine, debunking Ibn Alexander and exposing various ways in which he embellished his reports and in a self-serving manner. So it's this is very controversial, and many of his claims are very dubious.
I mean, experiences are experiences. You can only doubt the man and say he's lying.
Mm-hmm.
That you can. That you always can.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you would suggest?
Well, I'm just saying that was what an investigative reporter uncovered, all sorts of discrepancies in the story, and whether this was lying or whether it was some sort of confabulation of an individual who was delirious while undergoing some medical procedures and who reconstructed it afterwards in a way that led to a best-selling book that just happened to solve a lot of financial needs that he had. You know, the whole network. So I'm not going to say this man is a fraud or consciously deceptive, but I just think that those of us in this area need to be a little bit skeptical about such claims, and these claims are also very much within a evangelical Christian context, and so there's a whole bunch of stuff tied in there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you should be skeptical about it. What actually captured my attention was that he described two qualities of experiences. One of waking up, which were completely psychotic and disarranged and full of anxieties, and one which he seemed to have had during his 7 days while he was in coma. And the coma was very well documented. Of course, he could be confabulating. That could be true. But apart from that, there are other cases. He's not the only one. Like Pim van Lommel has documented a couple of cases. And Pim is a really, really honest person. I know him quite well, and he is one of the top cardiologists in the Netherlands. And he was actually converted by his research about the facticity of these reports, because he documented all cases that had happened over, I think, a 5 or 6 year period in all Dutch hospitals. And out of that came his research, where he documented a couple of cases that seemed to be very plausible.
But can you explain more what he claims?
What's
the idea?
What he did was he did a prospective study, and this is the first prospective study of near-death experiences, not retrospective, of all cases of heart failure in Holland, in Dutch hospitals. I think over a 5 or 6 year period, and that was published in Lancet a while ago. And what he found out was that the rate of near-death experiences is actually far lower than was previously assumed. About 18% or so of people have that. And within those 18%, he found a couple of people where there was exactly what we have heard previously in the phenomenology, where people were looking at their bodies, they were looking at procedures that were done to their bodies and were completely conscious over the whole time. And one person, that's the most spectacular of the cases, one person actually saw how the nurse that assisted the procedures took the dentures, the artificial dentures, out and put them on a board somewhere, or in a drawer, I think. And when this person awoke and talked to people, he said, "And you are the nurse who took out my dentures, right?" So he remembered that and related to people. And Pim has a couple of these cases, and I doubt that this is confabulated, because it's all very, very straightforward. So there are cases that document that. Pim van Lommel, like this. I'll write it down for you. Pim van Lommel. And you'll find his stuff, a lot of it is online. I think he has a website also. So,
could you please talk a little bit about intention and free will or decision making in your system?
Good point. I I think intention is actually a conscious activity, and free will as well. And actually free will, or the faculty to decide to do something, is, from my perspective, one of the major arguments against a purely reductionist materialist system, because there it's very difficult to create a notion of that. And I think intention is actually important for everything we do, delineating potential boundaries. Because by intending something, we include and exclude things, be it actions, be it people, be it ideas. Whatever, ideas. And so when you phenomenologically watch good therapists or good healers work, what they do is they set by intention, they create systems. And that relates to your question about system theory. I think the model which we have created is a systems theoretical model which you can apply to every type of system and any kind of system in any size. So intention to me would be the faculty to perform boundary creation within a system, be it within yourself, be it in relationship to others.
Who in your system has this faculty?
Well, that's a good point, because we haven't given enough thought about that. But it would be, of course, the psychological system, the psychic system that does it.
Not only, I think. Not only, it's as well a motorical one, as you see. It starts very early to show what you want to have. So feed as a baby.
Well, because it also has consciousness, very simple, I think.
So if you
it's both, I think. I think it's both. It's intentional.
So if you thought of a system with many subsystems and many components and interfaces, then in the qualities of holism and emergence and some of the things that occur in systems, then would it be like a shared consciousness?
Yeah, maybe.
And so, but we don't really know.
Could be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure there is. Or let's put it differently. There has always been a debate in the history of thought in the West, and by the way also in the East, about the nature of consciousness. Is it individual? Is it common? Is there one mind? Are there many minds? And maybe this is also an expression of a certain kind of complementarity between individual and the whole.
Yeah.
Right? So there is probably a common mind as well as individual minds.
Archetypes. Archetypes of human.
Archetypes would be an example of that, yeah.
Or holons. The holon theory speaks to that.
Whatever they are, yeah.
Whatever they are.
Whatever they are. Maybe. Yeah?
Just back to the technical side, have you ever done research on the EPFX
On the what?
EPFX or Trojan biofeedback system, Bill Nelson?
I don't understand what you're saying.
It's a biofeedback device that was developed in America, and it's currently the main inventors in Hungary. But it's been around about 20 years.
Biofeedback in general, you
But
mean?
it's quantum biofeedback. It's one of the only devices that actually has a feedback loop with the unconscious mind.
No, I don't know that. What is it? Describe it a bit.
It's this, it basically is a stress release biofeedback system. But the strength of it is because it has communication with the unconscious mind, and it releases stress and measures stress. But it's quite an interesting system based on
How does it do that?
It's very complex. I'll probably mess up the technology if I try and explain that. I would like you to actually look at it and get your feedback.
I don't know it, so I can't comment on it.
I've been working with it for over 16 years.
And what is it called exactly?
Well, it's got different names in different countries. EPFX, Eclosion, Skew. It's gone under very...
EPSX.
EPFX.
FX.
Yeah, it's Quantum Zeroid Interface System. And it was invented by Bill Nelson. He's been slandered a lot on quackery and all kinds of websites, but his basic scientific knowledge is very sound, and the way it's been developed and the way we use it in research and in practice it's very effective. Many medical professionals also use it and find that they actually have to do much less surgery because of the energetic changes that
I don't have
help
any
them.
opinion on that because I don't know, but I may be able to give a couple of ideas to that point. I mean, I'm working in the alternative medical field. My normal work is I'm training doctors, postgraduate training of doctors in a course that is on cultural sciences and complementary medicine. And I meet lots of doctors that use all sorts of machines that are scientifically completely implausible, but they are magnificent. Really, they have extremely good results. One of our students, I told her to do a master thesis on that, and she produced a case series of 70 cases of people who have had recurrent seasonal rhinitis, and they've done the whole lot of it. They've done all desensitizations allergology can produce, and they have done everything. No effect. And she has this little machine, which is it's actually called I'm missing the name currently. It'll come to me. It's a machine that uses the information, so to speak, of the person, and then uses a random number generator to generate some new stuff and send it out into the universe, and bias quantum probabilities. You laugh, and it's laughable in a way because scientifically it's complete madness. But it costs about €4,000, and she works with it. And these patients, they got healed. 70% of these patients were better after a year, and had to take no histamines. So there is a lot of machinery like that, and they have all sorts of different scientific theories, which most of the time are either wrong or stupid or both.
What we found with the system, it might be interesting to connect you with
And
Thomas Askins in Norway. He's done a really good research.
That could be a different one. I don't know that one.
Thomas Askins works with the same device, but also others. But what's interesting with this device, with this loop with the unconscious mind, is that sometimes it's got a mind of its own, the device almost, and sometimes it will give the therapist feedback and say, this is what you need to focus on. You're focusing on aggression on yourself. So there's definitely something quite interesting built into the system.
I'd be very interested to hear about it. The point I was making, or was about to make, was I call these machines non-classical pseudo-machines. Okay, they present with a classical interface, with a theory, so to speak, that makes plausible what is happening there, and the sole purpose of that plausibility is actually to create a system.
And isn't that what medicine was based on initially? I mean,
maybe we don't know that. Okay.
Okay.
We don't know that. Maybe medicine was based on that initially.
All kinds of things shouldn't have worked.
Yeah, the point is it creates a system, and it creates a vector for the intentionality of the therapist. So what is actually happening there is some kind of spiritual healing by the method, by way of that machinery. And I don't know whether that machine falls into the same category. I don't know it, but there is a lot of stuff going on. To me, this is actually, and the effects are very strong. To me, that is a good example of what we can actually achieve by consciously using these models, because it allows us to understand how non-local causation, in inverted commas, because it's not a causation, can happen by just setting systemic boundaries and operate via our consciousness. Because if we can pick up conscious content from others, we can also reverse the process.
Is this the same explanation for you for homeopathy?
Yes.
Just to set a vector?
Yeah. Homeopathy is also non-classical pseudo-machine, a very powerful one, by the way.
So it's indifferent what remedy you give?
Yeah. I've actually analyzed it that way, and I can send you a paper if you like. So the point I'm making here is, it's not just an explanatory model to understand how consciousness and physiology work together. It is also a good model to understand how we become active in the world. Because every doctor, a couple of doctors are here, are actually healers. doctors are also healers. They are using causal processes when they do surgery or when they give pharmaceuticals, but most pharmaceuticals don't work anyway, but that's another discussion. They use causal processes, but possibly they use these causal processes in order to enhance the power of the non-causal processes they are also using, which would be these ones. Processes by intention.
I'd like to go back to the transhumanism issue, and I'm curious regarding whether transpersonal psychology is adding to that movement, and with all of the moral implications and what I find frankly very scary, notwithstanding the good things regarding limb replacements, but the idea of seeking eternal life through embodying the artificially reconstructed thoughts and patterns of a brain into a machine, and then of course the logical implication then would be, well, destroy the body. And that's
create a clever machine.
Yeah, because you've got the golem, the robot.
That's the golem.
So to what extent is transpersonal psychology, in terms of its political ramifications, fueling this, analogously, say, to how a lot of transpersonal romanticism provided an underpinning for what occurred in Nazi Germany?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Nazi Germany was actually a spiritual movement. Most people don't know that, but it was actually a spiritual movement. And in the same sense, transhumanism is actually a crypto-spiritual movement.
Yes.
Yeah, quite true. I don't think that I mean, that's my opinion, but let's open the circle here. I don't think that transpersonalists actually fuel that movement, except by not doing anything against it, maybe. But other people may have different opinions. Come in, you had something new.
Sorry, I'm just thinking, there are two things that are happening here. One is the implantation of an artificial limb that's doing something. The other one is this quest for eternal life through brain control or brain implantation. But so you mentioned something about the definition, the fluidity of the individual. I mean, we're enhancing our brains all the time in non-connected, non-plugged-in ways. Take the computer, for example, as an extension of the self. When my computer crashes, I'm completely lost. But at the same time, my function is transplanted into this machine, and it enhances my ability to set boundaries, set intention, and act. So you've got connected transhumanism, and you've got non-connected transhumanism. That's happening all the time. Our motor cars are just another tool that's an extension of our body, etc., etc., etc. So the boundaries are fluid. Again, the boundaries of individuality are fluid, and we don't have to go as far as a limb standing quite spookily on a desk to say our gut flora are influencing our behavior and influencing our experience profoundly. These are little bacteria, or not so little, there are hundreds of millions of them that dwell in our gut and affect our ability to think, and affect whether we have eczema, and affect our emotions, and whether we put on weight. These are all non-me, so to speak, but they're very much part of me. So it comes back to your question of who am I, really? That's not a question or a point. That's just what I want to put in the mix.
Yeah, exactly.
What I want you to stress is that normal human personality is prone to change. If you put into a robot the personality and thought and feeling patterns of a nice old lady who loves cats, who knows, maybe she in 10 or 20 years will turn into a Terminator.
Main ingredient of consciousness is being itself. If you know what I'm talking about, I mean, if I'm conscious, what am I conscious of? I'm conscious of being in this world. I'm conscious of being in this world with space and time, distance between me. So the existence itself is part of the consciousness, right? Now, if you stick to consciousness, if we're going to start thinking of this transhumanism, you're sticking all this functionality in there, but what is the world that it is experiencing? It may not even be our world at all. And we would have no way of knowing it. Just like I have no way of knowing what you experience in your life. Because it has to do with your state of being at the moment. And so it's not just a matter of consciousness isn't something so simple as, you're conscious or unconscious. You're conscious with the history and you're also conscious with the state of being, So it's a lot more, it's deeper by infinite measures, in the way I think about it.
Yeah, but still, Harry's question is in the room. Did transpersonalists contribute to that movement? Or maybe we could turn it around and say, what has transpersonal psychology to say, to do, or to change in the face of that situation, if any? Is there any? Yeah.
The main question is this dehumanizing? Is this project dehumanizing?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But can we raise, I don't know, $30 billion as the spiritual project, as it were?
The Vatican did.
Huh?
The Vatican did.
Sorry?
The Vatican did.
The Vatican Church.
The Vatican Church.
They raised
yeah, well, I don't have access to those funds, I'm afraid.
I'm not sure we have to raise $30 million.
Okay.
I don't know that we have to raise $30 million or $30 billion. I do think that we have to raise our heads. One of my ongoing criticisms of transpersonal psychology, which I adore, but I struggle with, is, we're kind of like sneaking through the mainstream, the red umbrella and the black, and the nail that stands up gets hammered, so we lurk and we fly low on the radar. And this is, I've never heard of this. This is actually quite horrifying to me, and I'm having a present moment of experience of what the hell and where have I been? How did I not know? And now what do I do? And how many of us in the room will stand in a room of peers and take a stand and say, this is not okay. I'm not okay with this. I'd be willing to go to an APA conference and say that. But I actually don't know a lot of people who would. And so maybe we only need $3 million and a whole bunch of people who are willing to step forward. And we have a lot of introverted personalities in our field.
Right.
And I think that doesn't serve us on the applied side of our work. It serves us on the intellectual side, the theoretical side. It's beautiful, it's elegant, but it's not enough. Our work needs to be, surely it needs to be in the world. Somebody has to respond to that, and if not us, then who?
Exactly, I think that's a very valid point. What we need to do at the end of the day is actually make ourselves visible and take up the discussion.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Somehow.
Everyone in his or her position.
Well, Sir Roger Penrose explained in some of his papers why this would not work, why you can't make a machine think, act, and feel like a human.
And Roger is probably right.
You can only emulate. You can only emulate, but you cannot do this. He explained there was a lot of theory why this should be unique to a biological being.
I probably agree with you, and the point is, well, we can just sit down and let's wait until 2045 and then say, yeah, it didn't work anyway. We knew it all along, right? But by the time they will have eaten up $300 billion of research that do not go our way. Okay, so I think we would probably be wise to do something about it, right? That was, I guess, your intention. And maybe you have a plan, as I know you.
Well,
which you would like to
I
share.
fear that in some ways the transpersonal vision undermines the humanistic or personal vision, and that by emphasizing the transpersonal, we might be opening the door to these sorts of endeavors. That because as we do things like deconstruct the ego and look at the human being as not just the embodied person, but something much more, we fuel these sorts of things, and that's a potential shadow side. One area, aside from the planting the artificial intelligence into the machine, that I see as looming is the area of teleportation, where all of the information that constitutes a human being at a particular moment in time, if it could be read and then transmitted somehow so that a replica is created elsewhere and then destroy the original, that is teleportation. And we're doing that now with our 3D printers and different sorts of things, and it's also being done in ways that are entangled with very small things. I heard recently they teleported a molecule that had several hundred atoms.
Yeah.
So this is another thing looming, and I find these very threatening and scary. And I am concerned that we have opened a certain door in our efforts that may be supporting things that are not very good.
Well, I can understand that. And the point is history, and we cannot change it in the sense that it has already happened. But what can we do? What's your idea about what should happen?
Well, I think to begin talking about it like this is a good first place.
I would have another idea to use machines for our purposes. For example, what you mentioned before, there are brain-computer interface machines, and I've recently read a very interesting book which has become a bestseller in Austria at least, by Niels Bierbaumer. It's called The Brain, no, Your Brain Knows More Than You. I think this was a title that attracted me a lot. And I read about these brain-computer interface machines, and they did a study where they examined the wavelengths of the brain of Buddhist monks who had meditated for more than 40,000 hours, something that I will never, of course, be able to do in my life. And I found it interesting that they found out a certain recurrent pattern that they had in the frontal cortex, a certain kind of wavelengths. And what attracts me, and I think I'm a very pragmatic person, I would like to use these machines to stimulate my wavelength, so that I can make a leap forward, because I'm not very disciplined. I do not meditate as much as I would like to. I don't have the time, or this is an excuse. But I can imagine that for many of us who want to broaden their horizon, it could be a good idea to use a machine for our purpose.
Well, we actually tried that, but it doesn't work. But that might be because we were not good enough. But I actually worked together with a guy who invented the brain-computer interface, and we measured 60 people with an EEG. And the bad news is they all have different EEG patterns. And that is probably why you can't do that, because you could possibly only induce one certain type of meditative state, and it would certainly be very complicated. But it's a good suggestion. One could try.
I think that if we talk about it so much and thinking how we can stop this, we're just stealing time from ourselves. But I think the best if we just start at least half an hour a day, meditate ourselves, going into us, and then maybe discover something in us, and from that new experiences we will know the answer, what for us to do to not prevent this, but to become infinite before them, so they wouldn't need to do it.
Now this is a very good statement to wind up that workshop, I think, because maybe if we take ourselves more seriously in the creatorship which we have, in the actual power to have influence in the world by just setting intentions, and actually in the sense of a culture of consciousness, practice that daily, every day.
What I see is that in the future it's becoming a machine, instead of body. It gives us a message that we are not aware of our body right now. And if we are not conscious and aware about our body, that's what's happening. because we're sitting talking, but we're not feeling our body this time. So we just need to get embodied, not to lose our bodies.
Well, maybe that is a good way to end, because I think that is, at least for me, the consequence that comes out of that. That by using our consciousness to set intentions that are in harmony with the whole might be a way forward, even for transpersonalists. So I think we have to close before I get the red flag here. Thank you all for coming. I write down my email on that board, and if you want any papers related to that, okay, you can just email me and I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming and have a good time.
Thank you.